Good evening, everyone. Before I start talking, I'd like to introduce our wonderful guest artists on stage. Right here is Wilfrid Laurier's and this region's very own amazing Penderecki string quartet. And plugging in right next to them from Maxwell's Music House, which is an amazing institution in Waterloo, Dave Mansell. Tonight I want to talk about rebel music. And this kind of got going in my head about 10 years ago when I was conducting a youth orchestra in San Francisco. I was in my 20s, and maybe a senior in high school came up to me and said, "You know, Mr. Outwater, your generation was so cool. You had music that really stood for something. You fought against everything. You weren't complacent or stale. Your generation had spirit." And I kind of looked at her and I said, "Well, thank you. Do you realize I grew up in the Reagan era?" I didn't. But then I thought about it and I knew kind of what she meant, because in my time, the late 70s, early 80s, there were two genres of music that were created that kind of shook things up: rap, hip hop, and punk, and all the offshoots of punk. And it got me thinking about what this kind of rebellious music is and what it's been throughout history. And right now, we all kind of have this kind of image in our mind of rebel music, and it often involves a guitar in the 21st century, that you're kind of sitting around and going about your business, and then you hear this sound, man. And it kind of shakes you up. It sounds something like this. And for the future rock star in the making, that sound makes you want to pick up a guitar and play so loud that you cannot be ignored, and lets you stick it to the man. That is the story of the rock rebel. And it's a myth we all know now. And it's not a very old myth, right? Electric guitars haven't been around all that long. And a couple months ago, I was in Australia conducting a youth orchestra. And I would kind of spend all day conducting music by Ravel and Saint-Saëns in this university, just day and night with faculty. We were living and breathing classical music. And then at the end of the day, I would walk back to the hotel. And then I thought to myself, wait a second. Am I not part of some weird underground culture now in the 21st century? Is classical music not what it once was? And could it perhaps be more rebellious now to pick up a bassoon than to pick up an electric guitar? And are the paradigms and are the myths changing? Because I had my own moment of awakening after listening to a lot of punk rock and skateboarding and doing things like that. But it was exactly the opposite of the rock myth, that I walked into a chamber music concert in Southern California, of all places. It was in a church, of all places, and I saw a string quartet play some music by Beethoven, and it was quiet, and this is what it sounded like. That was Beethoven giving thanks in his string quartet, Opus 132, for surviving an illness that nearly killed him. It was his way of thanking him at the world for being alive, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard in my life. And it made me realize that there was more in the world than was in my philosophy at the time. And there was so much more to discover. And one of the great pleasures about being a musician is the discovery continues. And it's not a kind of sound you hear in culture these days, in life. And that's what I mean when I think maybe classical music right now is the ultimate rebel music. Because it's the opposite of what we have around us. It's acoustic. It's slow. It takes time to say what it has to say. It's extremely serious at its best. It's secret knowledge that a lot of people don't have because, let's face it, cultural literacy now is how many Simpsons episodes you know, not how many string quartets you know, and that's okay. But it is this kind of secret thing that's happening, and it's an amazing thing to discover. But really, it's not about classical music or rock music or genre. In fact, those of you who know me know that I love all the different iterations of music, that genre is actually not important to me. And in fact, things can often be the opposite of what you think, and generalizations aren't always correct. For instance, guitars can sound mellow. Ah, yes. Nice. Wow. And at the same time, string quartets can stick it to the man. That is Bartók's fourth string quartet, Get Into It. So, to me, it's not about genre. It goes beyond genre, rebel music, that is. Because really there are two kinds of art or two kinds of music that exist as far as I'm concerned. There is music that turns you on, and there's music that turns you off. There's art that makes you engage, and there's art that makes you disengage. And sometimes we all need to disengage. We're tired, and we need to tune out. And there's plenty of music and art for you to help you do that. But it's the engaging art that's the rebel art. It's the things that are fighting against mediocrity. It's the things that wake you up and make you realize there's more in the world than that is in your philosophy. And there are times when this rebel art takes over the world. I think probably the last time was quite a few years ago, and I wasn't born yet. In fact, I had like my 18-year-old quote to my cousin, who was slightly older. I said, you know, you think your 60s music is so cool, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix. And you know, when I grow up, this 80s music is going to be just as awesome. I was wrong. Because at that time, that music took over the world, that the rebel call of all this music turned the world upside down. And it really hasn't happened since. So what can we do in the meantime? I'm kind of waiting. You know, what will the next soundtrack to all of this be? Who knows? Right now, the choices are myriad because we can listen to any music we want and we can do anything we want with sound. So I'm looking around. Where's it going to happen? In Wisconsin? Maybe. What is the soundtrack of music? What is the thing that's going to call us and awaken all of us again? What's that music going to be? What is the next soundtrack of rebellion? How can we enjoy it now? How can we get ready for it? And are we going to be a part of it? Thank you.